I'm Dave Laird.
I'm Matt Bucher, and this whole episode could be a title for the Belan Deck. Oh.
Nice, Matt. Welcome.
That's all I could come up with.
I love it. So, attentive listeners will notice that we have a guest today on the show, but the guest on the show today is also the regular co-host. So, Matt Bucher, welcome to episode 73. Thank you for joining Concavity Show as our special guest today. You have recently come out with a book called The Belan Deck, and we're here to talk about it.
Thanks, Dave.
I'm excited to have you on, man.
It is very weird trying to do this or think about it in this way, and it's very weird being on this side of it. Like, I didn't think of this, when I was writing this book, and I don't want to ever seem like a self-promotional clown.
Yeah, I wanted to say up front that this was entirely my idea, and I pushed you really hard on it, and you are a humble guy, and you were like, nope. And I was like, let's get like another co-host. We can like co-interview you. You were like, nope. I was like, okay, I'm going to let people know that this is entirely my push to have this episode.
It's not my idea.
To talk about your book, Matt. So I want people to know that. Because I think it's fantastic and one of the best books that I have read in years and among some of my very favorite books ever. So it deserves at least a little, blip in our catalog for sure, because it's very apropos of what we do in this book.
And my chances of becoming like a reclusive writer who doesn't give interviews, that's pretty already much torpedoed by the fact I'm doing
that was a foregone
podcast
conclusion.
Interviews all the time anyway, so can't start developing that personality.
Yeah, that's true. It's too late for you, buddy.
Suddenly now.
But you did do a very cool thing with this book where you didn't tell anybody that you were writing it, at least that I know. I didn't know about it. Our close friends that we were in constant contact with didn't know about it. One day you just texted our thread a picture of the cover and said, I'm sending you guys this. And we were all like, what? What is this? Tell us more. And you were like, oh, it's just a little project I've been working on. And then we all, lost our minds and then received it and read it. And it's a very short little sort of pocket book. It's 119 pages and the dimensions of it are quite small. So I read it like within a day of getting it in the mail. You can read it in 1 or 2 sittings pretty comfortably, I'd say. And we were all just like, holy shit, Matt, this is phenomenal work. Like, I can't believe you didn't tell us about this.
Thanks, man. Well, I part of my original idea was to to wait another year or two and just put out like 3 or 4 books.
Oh, wow. Just a massive drop.
I had wanted to, I thought that would be cool just to be like, hey, I've never published a book before, but here's like 3 of them. And I still have plans of doing more. I mean, I'm getting up there in age. And so I have been, writing and working for a long time, and I have a lot of material that I've accumulated, and I used to put a lot more on my websites, plural, my blogs and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Like
and
Simple Ranger and stuff.
All that stuff has just become infected with WordPress spam, and it gets no traffic at all because the way that Google controls their algorithm now. And I love books anyway, so why not just preserve it and, let the sites kind of be their own thing, and a book is a different format. Mm-hmm. So again, I still have other things that I'm working on that I hope to come out with more in the future. But yeah, with this one, I actually had a different form of the book a long time ago. Mm-hmm. Maybe like 8 years ago, I had put together something kind of similar to this, but there was no corporate angle to it. It was much more just like homage to David Markson, and the framing bit of it in the first draft was kind of like a ghost is haunting the basement of the Strand bookstore in New York.
Oh, cool.
And it was David Markson as kind of the ghost, and it was like Hamlet, and it was kind of like, but it was very self-referential, and I actually got pretty far along and maybe even publishing that or publishing excerpts of it. And in the end, I'm glad that it did not get published because I feel like it wasn't ready.
Yeah.
And, even if it took me 8 more years of thinking about it and then coming back to it and working on it in the past couple of years, it was worth it to me to wait. So let this be a lesson to anyone who's out there working on something in total obscurity. Take your time. There's no, unless this is your job.
Yeah.
And, this is one kind of point I make in the book, too, is like fucking James Joyce struggled to make a living as a writer.
There is a line,
and so making money from the thing was obviously not a concern of mine.
Yeah.
It was more like I just wanted it to be something I was proud of in the end.
Yeah.
And in the end, I am proud of it.
Well, you should be. It's phenomenal. There's a line you have in the book about something to do with being a living, working artist is incompatible with the goals of capitalism or the constraints of capitalism or something like that, which sounds like, trying to be a writer and make money is very tough. I suppose if you had published that book 8 years ago, you would have beat Louise Erdrich to the punch, having a book about, a ghost who haunts a bookstore, in the sentence by her that
I haven't read that book. But...
Yeah, I haven't read it either, but Rachel has been raving about it to me, and I like Louise Erdrich, what I've read, little bits.
Yeah, Brandon Hobson recommended a book of hers when he was on our show.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But, I am very thankful for, the people who have read it and reviewed it or, said nice things about it so far.
Yeah, you're getting a ton of great press already.
Well, as you know, putting out a podcast, anyone can review it, right? And
I do know that, unfortunately.
I put out podcasts for work too, right?
Yeah.
It's part of my day job.
Yeah.
And with all of our shows, it doesn't matter what show it is, every single show in the world has some negative reviews. And so I work in a format where random strangers on the internet can review it. And I hadn't put a lot of thought of that again until the book came out. And I was like, oh shit, people are going to be able to leave reviews about this thing publicly. Right. And
Goodreads, Amazon. Oh man, there's a lot of places
I was
for
like,
that.
oh God, I had not really thought about that.
Right.
Like I say, I was just focused on the content of the book.
Yeah.
And, so when it came out, I was sort of cringing, just waiting for that first
first
negative review, and I still kind of am. But so far, everyone has been really generous and kind about it.
Yeah, you've had some great ones, like Edwin Turner of Biblioclept posted a really nice review of this book recently. Philip Friedenberg left a really nice review on Goodreads that I read today. Eric Eckel just posted something on his site. And you have 2 really nice 5-star reviews on Amazon. Not even 4 stars, 5. Well, so well done.
Thanks, Dave. But, the thing about that is, on Goodreads, too, there's some, in the past, I've seen some books that I really admire get just absolutely savaged in Goodreads. And Goodreads in particular has some, people who go on there, I feel like, really mean-spiritedly.
Sure. Yeah.
And that has made me realize, one, every book that I love, some people hate it.
Sure.
So that doesn't say anything about the book. It says something if you see someone leave a really mean-spirited review, I don't think wow, this book must be trash. I think this person must be trash who's writing the review. Right. Yeah. And so I honestly feel like the book is written in such a way that it kind of anticipates a lot of its own criticisms, where
it does.
The book is a stand-in, or the deck is a stand-in for the book.
Yeah, it's very self-aware.
So Belan criticizing the deck is really a metaphor for people criticizing the book.
Right.
And books that I admire, the type of fragmented short books that I admire, especially that other people just don't get.
Right. Yeah, and maybe David Markson's style is not for everyone, and that's fine, but it's great for us and a lot of people, similar writers.
An interesting thing too is there's been people at work who I only know from my corporate job who are as I put it on LinkedIn, and I actually got a ton of people I never talked to anymore, respond on LinkedIn. Yeah. I got a really good response, and I was like, oh shit, these people, I don't know what they're expecting. Right.
Yeah.
But my ideal reader, I've realized, is someone who maybe has a little bit of corporate
Right.
experience with a little bit of, I don't know, literary philosophy,
Yeah.
you know, who's heard of David Markson at
Yeah.
least. So that would be nice to. I realize that intersection. I think people get something out of it, but it's been interesting to see which people, you know, resonates with what parts of it.
Yeah, I bet. I think going back to what you were saying earlier about the timing of this book, maybe you just needed like 8 more years in the corporate world to, like, you know, get some more experience to like round out some of these ideas and be able to sort of interrogate them like in the way you do. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and that's definitely a part of it. I think I didn't want to have too much story in it, honestly.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
a lot of my favorite books and movies are like ones where nothing happens and it's really interior.
Yeah.
All right, it's conversations, characters. It's not like plot driven.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I did get more life experience in that time, and so I wanted to put some of that in there.
Mm-hmm.
But like, have you read all the how much of David Markson have you read, Dave? Have
I
you
have
like
read This Is Not a
last
Novel and Wittgenstein's Mistress. I have not
Okay.
read any of the other. There's
Okay,
2
so
others. Is that right? 2 or 3
there's
others
4
that are
total.
like that. Yep.
So the first one of that, what's called like a note card tetralogy,
Yes,
is Reader's Block,
Mm-hmm.
which was published by Dalkey shortly after Wittgenstein's Mistress was
Mm-hmm.
published. And that book has a lot more of Markson in it, and it has
Like
some
biographically,
bits,
sort of like
but it has like
personality,
more of
things like that.
a character in
Yeah.
it.
Okay.
Like,
Yeah.
you know how like in Wittgenstein's Mistress, you're all in this person's head, and like, you know, you're following them around. Maybe they're going to the beach, and you know, what is it like living there?
Mm-hmm.
Do they hear sounds? And what? There's some of that in Reader's Block, where who is this author telling us these facts?
Yeah.
And you know, what is his life like? And then the next one comes out, which is the one you read, This Is Not a Novel. And that one, he's basically saying like, I'm tired even coming up with characters and stories.
Here's just how a bunch of famous people died, more or
Right.
less.
and I mean, there's some themes that
Yeah.
you can try to follow through that, but he's like, I've lost patience with even like making up a story.
Yeah.
And there's something about that even appeals to me now, where I'm
Yeah.
like, the story part of it, I'm like, fuck, do you really care? You know, like I could work all this time on telling some, you know, coming of age story or some office novel. And like, for me, it's really hard to make that come alive.
Yeah.
And, you know, you're competing against people who have done all kinds of other brilliant stuff with that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's partly about like finding a way to just find your own voice in this. You know, it's kind of a crowded space.
Yeah.
And Markson did it. Like, there's nothing like that before him. I mean, there are some things kind of like it, which I can get into, but he made it such his own style that I loved it.
Totally. Yeah. So this book, like, if we were just sort of describe it, give people like a quick summary, it's a very, like, I would say like a love letter to David Markson's like style, kind of like an homage to how he wrote that series of books. So you've just basically got like a bunch of clauses that are separated by like a line break throughout, very similar to what you see in Markson's writing. And this is a book about a character waiting in San Francisco in SFO for a flight to Denver that just keeps getting delayed. And as you wait around for hours and hours, you're thinking about this PowerPoint deck that you're making for the CEO of this corporation you work for, whose name is Belan, and he's totally a douche into AI stuff. And there's a lot of like thought and musing about AI and corporate life. Obviously, the way that PowerPoint is just really a shitty format to deliver information to people, and it's non-memorable and it's transitory and all this kind of stuff. But the deck is something that you're obsessively working on and thinking about throughout the book. So plot-wise, it's a guy taking an Uber to the airport, sitting around waiting for a plane. That's what happens in the book.
Right.
But it's the inner discourse of all the stuff that this narrator is thinking about as he sits around hanging out in the airport. And for me, like, because I know you pretty well, we've been friends for almost a decade, like, I see your personality and fingerprints like all over this book. And I'm sure people who have listened to the show for a long time will also see like a lot of Matt Bucher in this book. So to say that it's like an unnamed narrator to me is like, well, this is the mind of Matt Bucher. But so I love that about the book. Like someone who has no idea who you are and just picks this up and reads it would have a very different experience than I do, or someone who knows you reading this book, I think, which is really cool that it can go, like it can scale for either direction in a way that I think would be totally unique and enjoyable for whoever reads it.
Yeah, and just physically, one thing I've always liked about the David Markson books is like you pick one up and open it, and it doesn't seem intimidating because it is all broken up into these little fragments. And I wanted to replicate that in whatever way I did. And there are parts of the book. There's one part that's like a numbered list. Yeah. There's more that are lengthy quotes and things, but I feel like there's this tension in all of us between reading a print book these days and like scrolling on your phone. And so I kind of also wanted those paragraphs in the book to be about the length of a tweet.
Yeah.
And it would be, even as an ebook, like something you could scroll and read, almost like when you're scrolling Twitter, you've got all of these like kind of unconnected thoughts. And sometimes there's common themes that pop up. But it's also easy to keep scrolling. And like with a reader, I think when you're writing something, it's hard to keep people turning the page. Like for me as a reader, it's always easy for me to put a book down. But with the Markson books, I think I realized it was hard for me to put those books down because
it's such an addictive style.
It was just like, what's next?
Yeah.
What's next? Yeah. What's next? What's next? Yeah. And your brain is sort of feeding on this, impulse to know what's next. Yeah. And that's one thing that I really wanted to replicate, is just to keep people turning the page of like, and again, there's no suspense of like what's going to happen. Even though
there's a bit of an arc, like
it does end in a bit of suspense, a little bit,
for sure,
but it's not like, it's not plot driven of like, why are you turning the page? It's more of like,
it's like curiosity.
Can you turn off? Right. Your brain is just like looking for a pattern almost. Yeah. So, and this sounds really fucking pretentious for me to say this, right? But like, I did put a little bit of thought into like, how do I keep people just physically turning the pages? Yeah. And for me, this is an approach that I wanted to try. So
yeah, you kind of capture this on page 99 well, with a description that to me seems very meta about this book, which is, what seems beautiful to me, what I should most like to do, would be a book about nothing. A book without any exterior ties, but sustained by the internal force of its style. A book which would have almost no subject, or at least in which the subject would be almost invisible, if that's possible. The most beautiful works are those with least matter, wrote Flaubert. So this book sort of does that, essentially. It's almost like a meta commentary on itself a little bit.
Well, and I think that I actually just stole that from David Markson. And that I think he uses this a shorter version of that Flaubert quote somewhere.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong. I don't even remember how I found that. Yeah. But
and then right above that entry, you've got two, which are a deck with no plot and a deck about nothing, which I sort of is maybe like a Seinfeld nod a little bit, I hope. Nothing. Yeah. I mean, this book is about something, but in some ways it's like a string of clues, a collection of interesting details, clues rather than trivia, as you say on page 49. And then I think the cover page evokes this sort of rabbit hole sensibility, and David Jensen did a great job on this cover to sort of, you're kind of like descending deeper and deeper down. It almost makes me think of like the Danielewski book a little bit, right? House of Leaves, like descending the infinite staircase down. And like rabbit holes, Wikipedia specific rabbit holes are a big theme and recurring idea in this book. And it's that relation to AI and computerization, whereas like, can computers be curious in the same way spontaneously that a human can instantly sort of just become curious about something and follow it for hours through like a series of Wikipedia links and related articles and all that stuff. Google Street View makes some appearances in this book, so like there are so many things that are so
Field
Matt
notes.
Bucher in this book. Field notes is a big recurring one. Pencils as weapons.
Yep. Which is It's a play on a Ricky Jay book title of playing cards as weapons.
Oh yeah,
cards as weapons.
nice.
And like, the pen is mightier than the sword and all that. But like with the
I love
cover, I did struggle of like what to put on it, and it was only text only for a long time. And I really liked old paperbacks that sort of had an older or kind of outdated look to them.
Yeah.
And there was one in particular that I love. And again, this sounds really like self-important, but so be it. Is I really liked the cover of these Andre Bazin books, What is Cinema? And it was pink. And I just remember thinking like, wow, that's such a weird choice for like this academic philosophical
Is he like a critical theorist?
About film theorist. Yeah. Okay. Cultural critic or whatever. But it was pink. And I was like, well, that'd be cool. Like he must have just said like, I want a pink book.
Yeah.
But the title too on the book is kind of a joke. I think I told you this where, the guy in the book spends a lot of time trying to come up with titles.
Yes.
And in the end, like the title of the book is just the Belan Deck, which is also, it could be abbreviated like TBD, to be determined. Like,
oh yeah, nice. I never thought of that. That's great.
I like that. And I love coming up with like titles of things, and like in Bolaño, he has, these fake writers like Arcamboldi who creates the fake titles of books that Arcamboldi had written. And in Infinite Jest you have all these fake filmography like JOI's filmography. And then I also remember when we interviewed Jessica Anthony, and that she talked about as part of her like creative writing practice, she'll come up with lists of titles of books.
That's right, I remember that.
And that's how she actually came up with Enter the Aardvark as a title first. And then she wrote the story after.
And then that sparked the idea for the narrative. Yeah. Right. Yeah. That was cool. How many titles of the deck are in this book? Like here's one on page 29. One title, Survival Mode in AI Experience Management. There's probably, I would guess, like 20 to 30 different possible titles for the deck that your narrator names.
I don't know.
Did you ever
I don't know, a lot. I don't know. I didn't count them. I mean, I could probably come up with 100 more. But part of that is based on reality, in that in like corporate life, you'll see these folders full of PowerPoint decks, and they all have like slightly different names. And that's a big deal when you have a lot of files. It's like, what is the file naming conventions? And so a lot of corporate jobs will tell you like you must name the file this way, like put the date, the title, the version number, and it's really hard to also name like new corporate products. Like there's whole teams of people that are naming experts, and so this is a very, I think, philosophical problem where even going back to like the Bible, like this is what the task that like God gives to man first, which is to name a bunch of stuff. To name all the animals and plants and things. And it's just a very, I don't know, symbolic thing of like what are you even doing in life besides naming
things?
And just pointing into it and be like, is this the deck? Like, had you heard that term for a PowerPoint deck? Like some places don't use that.
Only kind of recently, like in the last year or something. I think it's through like television. And I remember using that term regarding like a Google slideshow that I showed my class in English 9 recently. This was a few months ago, and Rachel goes, "Ugh, don't call it a deck. That's so douchey." And you've got a line on page 61 of this: hate calling it a deck, but also hate PowerPoint and presentation. So you like captured that feeling really well for me. But yeah, I know what you mean.
And in reality, I'm really terrible at PowerPoint. Like there's some people who, when they get into corporate life, like they really excel at making corporate PowerPoint decks. And I'm pretty terrible at it. So I end up just like copying theirs and renaming them and be like, find and replace, and be like, that was a great deck. And it's like, thanks to the miracles of like find and replace and save as, like, I don't have to worry about designing it so much as writing it. And I just, in general, have found that it is a unique skill, like being able to visually represent ideas. And mine is just not that. It's all text based. So like in the book itself, I had thought at some point of like even showing some slides from the deck.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, I don't want that. I want it to all be text only.
I mean, a curious question that emerges for me as I read this book is this book itself the deck? Because there's parts where you say that like the deck is now approaching like 250 slides. And I'm imagining you like presenting this at a corporate meeting with like Dave, the surfer guru guy, who's like the only guy in the room that you like. Jimmy's clearly douche. Belan's clearly douche. These are characters in the book. But like the book itself almost seems like it's becoming the deck, and the way you describe the goals of the deck are kind of what the book is also doing as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of all mixed up there where you're reading the book, but you're reading like what's going to go into the deck, or maybe what already has gone into the deck. Yeah. And I think for me, I just found myself a lot with my life. My thoughts are mixed up with my work, and like my work is almost inextricable because it is not like physical labor, it's mental labor. Yeah. It is like your thoughts become, sort of owned by this corporation, right?
Yeah.
Like you have to think about
your
it.
Mind in a way. Yeah.
Yeah. So that, and that, it's funny you mentioned that Dave, the guru guy, is based on a real guy who I met one time.
I believe it. Yeah.
Who was really named Dave, and like, is also kind of pointing back to, there's a couple of mentions of Steve Jobs in the book.
Yeah, and dating
Jennifer Egan.
Jennifer Egan, yeah. I did not know that actually before reading this. I looked it up.
Jennifer Egan also, is famous for, in A Visit from the Goon Squad, there's a chapter that is a PowerPoint presentation.
Right, yeah. Forgot about that.
So there's that PowerPoint connection.
Yeah.
But in Silicon Valley too, like, Jobs is regarded as almost like a god. Mm-hmm. And there used to be a time where there was maybe a little more liberal arts connection directly to like software and tech companies in general. Mm-hmm. And like people always say this about the Mac, is that Steve Jobs had like taken a calligraphy class at Reed College when he was there. And I'm like, that don't make him a fucking artist. Okay. He's still a capitalist just because he took one calligraphy class and he put some kind of humanization into the interface for the first operating system on a Mac doesn't make him an artist. You know that, right? But there were some other people who wanted to replicate this, and I think some big tech companies were a little more tolerant of some liberal arts types joining even in executive roles, partly because it seemed weird. Yeah. And like Jobs was a weird guy, right? Like, and that weirdness, is represented in this surf guru type character in the book. Right. And I was like, I want that job. Like, how do you get that job? Where you can just sort of like walk around a conference room and just like put out some pithy, weird statement, and people will be like, that's it. I need to follow that guy.
Right.
There's another crazy story where I don't know if you've ever heard this story of like back when like AOL bought Time Warner, and like Yahoo was hiring all these weird people. Like for a while they hired this DJ guy, Shingy.
Okay.
And it was like, well, we just think he's a visionary artist. We're going to bring in Shingy. And it's like, your mom and dad telling you like, it's okay to play hip hop in the car, Dave. And we're cool with it now. And you're like, what the fuck? Shingy? And have you seen a picture of this guy, Shingy?
I don't think so.
You got to Google him.
Okay, I'll do that right now.
And he would just do stuff, be like, I wrote a song about, synergy and love. And I just want to like inspire you guys. And like, what the hell is going on?
Okay, he's very wild looking. Yeah, okay. David Shang.
So there's just something that appeals to me about like where corporate life like gets weird and strange.
Yeah.
And and I think the narrator of my book is like clearly someone who doesn't fit in with just the normal like corporate
absolutely
execs.
Yeah. You get the sense that he's there because he has to be for a paycheck. And there are some interesting like philosophical connections that he is working through, particularly like AI is a big preoccupation of this book, and he's interested, but you can see the detachment throughout the narrator in this book is like I know that this world is pretty messed up, and I like don't necessarily want to be complicit with it, but maybe he thinks he can make some changes from the inside or something, you know?
Yeah, I think that's kind of where I was going with that. There was this company one time where you'd fly into SFO and you'd get on the 101 going north into San Francisco, and those billboards were like, I don't know, pricey real estate, valuable signage, because everyone in like Silicon Valley, right, is getting off the plane and going on 101 north. And there would be a company name like, and it would just be such marketing bullshit. It would
Right.
just say like the name of the company and then like AI and machine learning, and it's like that's like putting a restaurant billboard up that just says like food and drink. Like what? It doesn't tell you anything about like what kind
Totally
of food. Like,
chillax
is
awesome.
it good? Like,
Yeah.
it's just so vague. It's like the words AI and machine learning are almost meaningless.
Right.
And like the way that people use them now, it's the way that people were using, I don't know, like crypto or cyber or digital transformation stuff. It's just meaningless jargon.
Right. Yeah.
But I do think we're in a moment where there is a big conversation going on about AI
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
ChatGPT.
Yes.
And
That's a big conversation
sure
in
that-
education that I'm having a lot with a lot
Yeah,
of colleagues lately.
How are they approaching that?
Some people think that this is kind of a doomsday moment for education, at like the secondary and post-secondary levels.
Why is that? Why do they think it's doomsday? Really?
I mean, from like a plagiarism perspective, like it's presents some challenges. More optimistic folks are like, this is a cool moment in academia because now like we have to assess like what is the value of like a liberal arts education when a machine can just do this, like
I mean, but are there people there who are saying, well, let's just find a different way to grade, or I mean, let's find a different thing to assess rather than, writing that someone does off on their own time and comes back to you with? Like, are people trying to adapt to new?
yeah, somewhat. Like
new
some teachers are
reality?
now just like doing a lot more like in-class writing with like pencil and paper, no access to technology. So, that's one sort of loophole, one way to get around it. Or, if students have access to computers at some point in the writing process, you need to see like evidence of them showing their work along the way. So like getting them to write a paper outline for an essay that they hand in. It's part of their grade for the assignment. And then I can look at that paper outline, compare it to their final product and be like, yep, they wrote that, they probably wrote this essay based on what I've seen, in class or whatever.
Have you tried out ChatGPT? Have you tried to use it?
I have, yeah. I made a rubric with it the other day for a class presentation assignment that my students did. And it saved me a lot of time. It was really good.
I mean, what did it do? Like, I don't understand the rubric.
Like I asked it, I was like, make a rubric with a 5-point grading scale for these 3 categories. And here, just like quick parameters of the assignment. And then it just generated this grid that was like, yep, that's great. I tweaked a few things on it, but it was very similar to something that I would have made by hand, but it would have taken me like 20 to 30 minutes,
So you didn't have to really do it. Really saved you time the way that like a lot of other tools save you time.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah.
But it wasn't something where you felt like, oh, I can't deal with this or anything. Like you felt like the way that your kids would feel. I don't know. I'm trying to ask like how, is it really what we're afraid of? Like to me, that's not like the end all be all of a chat bot. Like people were afraid of other technology in the past.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. I like the phrase in the book that you have like, will legislators in our lifetime, like will we live in our lifetime to see legislators like end AI technology basically?
I mean, they're just so slow to change, right?
Yeah.
Like they're so behind the times, even when it came to like regulating the internet. And I feel like that they have totally failed in regulating the internet.
Sure. Yeah.
And there's a lot of things that should be probably illegal or regulated and are not well managed now. So if the technology starts changing a whole hell of a lot faster, how are they going to keep up with it? And like, will we live to see the point where, you know, the stuff that we wish that they had regulated now actually do come out and say like, oh, don't do that.
Wasn't there a thing like really recently in the last week or two of like a bunch of AI folks who signed a petition, and like one of the guys was the head of ChatGPT and like sent it to American legislators, and they were like, please stop this, like stop. You need to be the ones to tell us to stop what we're doing because we foresee this getting off the rails. And you've got stuff in the Belan Deck about like, you know, future AI enslavement of humans and all that kind of stuff, Jetsons robots, and there's a lot of fun play that you do with like the idea of robot as replacing humans or enslaving humans down the line.
Right. And I mean, people who are making really sophisticated technology who haven't really done any of the reading or research of, you know, going back to stuff that was done on AI in the 70s. I mean, the idea of AI has been around a very long time. And, you know, the idea of androids and robots has been around for a very long time as well. And thought out maybe some morals and ethics around it.
Yeah, you've got a great line on this on page 102. Invest in artificial intelligence without regard for intelligent ethics. So, like, has enough thinking been done on the front end or the back end of, you know, what does this stuff really imply? Like, where can it really go?
Well, I was also talking to a friend of mine who is maybe more on the science technology side of the corporate world or the actual science and research side. And I have this line in there that's like, science may accidentally reveal beauty, but software itself is almost entirely devoid of beauty.
Right.
And, you know,
but it could aim at elegance. Some code could aim at elegance.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But, you know, and I think a lot of people would really take issue with that. Same with like math or writing in a way. And that like the way that I'm trying to define beauty or elegance there is something that is explicitly not created by humans. And like, you know, we see this debate rise up with like genetic engineering in a lab and like, you know, will we be cloning babies in a test tube? And it's like once mankind is able to sort of create things that they were previously not able to create, and that could be, you know, a virtual reality world that is inseparable from our real world. It could be things like, you know, cloning babies. It could be things like creating robots that are inseparable from humans. Like this is all the subject of a lot of other more intelligent art and literature than me. but my point is like, it's not in the code itself is like, to me, that's not what I'm defining as like beauty, much less the sublime. And, you know, the same with mathematics and even writing to a degree, like just words on a page from a distance, like holding up a chart of words to me, even if it's beautiful words and you make sense of it, it's not the same as, you know, a redwood tree, the sunset that I put in there.
It's interesting that we talked about sublimity with our previous guest Sheila Liming a lot in relation to her book.
I had already written this book.
And I know. So then I was reading this. I was like, wait a second. This is like a lot like the conversation that we just had with Sheila. That was a really cool overlap for me.
Yeah, and like I think that's one reason why her book resonated so much with me is that it was very human-centered, right? It's very much around the idea of putting and keeping people at the middle of it. So like that person who is assessing students in a room with a sheet of paper and a pencil, that's a pure form of like human relationships to me. Like there's not this mediated thing of a computer that you can go tell it to write you an essay. Like that to me is not an abomination per se, but it's approaching something like a moral hazard or almost something like truly dangerous, which, you know, if you read much about like the idea of the singularity and like
where
Kurt
computers become like self-aware for the first time, like truly self-aware, is that more or less the idea?
Right. And they basically don't need humans anymore.
Right. Yeah.
Right now, like we can your computer starts doing some crazy, you can unplug it, right?
Yeah.
And you can turn it off.
Right.
But now, like, you can't turn off all the internet.
Right.
You can't turn off all the computers in the world. And so already we've lost some control. And like things with like smart homes, smart
Right.
devices, and
Yeah.
like they've got AI in a freaking Tesla now that can say, oh, turn left here regardless of what's in the way, or make choices beyond you. And I have this line in there too about like a computer can't be held responsible for its decisions, so it shouldn't make management
Corporate decisions are made. Yeah, that's right. That's a great line.
And there are people in the corporate world who are like, great, we can just blame the algorithm, we don't have to take responsibility ourselves.
Yeah.
And like that's a very key ethic of going back to the 1970s. For IBM developed this set of like ethics around computing, and one of them was like, you cannot blame a decision on a computer. Like if you're doing that, then you're putting the wrong decisions in the computer's hands.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
I'm not a computer person. Obviously, I'm a book and pencil and paper person, Dave. But like,
You clearly
we're all
like
forced to
know
grapple this shit.
a fair bit about computers, as evidenced
Well,
by
forced
this
to.
novel. Yeah, forced to. But you have this like hopeful line about all this on 39 where you say AI can't kill anything worth preserving. I like that. That's hopeful to me.
Yeah, I believe that it could accidentally work out for the best, where it sort of clears away a lot of stuff that people have forgotten about, or stuff people don't need, and we get back to what we've forgotten about in a way. Yeah. And I do believe that things are cyclical, and we do repeat our own history, whether we like it or not. So I am hopeful for the future. I have to be that way because, like you, I have kids. It's not maybe as hopeful with the climate crisis, but
yeah, that is one
combine it
cloud,
with
for sure.
Combine it with the AI bit. I'm hopeful that some smart and ethical people will not like try to jeopardize the fate of humanity.
Yes.
But we've seen like even with freaking Twitter of turn it into a right-wing political organization, and it's like, well, then people just don't want to have anything to do with it. But you can see I'm just going all over the place, which is kind of what the book does.
That's what the book does. That's what we always do on the show. We like to think of the show as just like hanging out at a pub, having a conversation. We don't have like a clear outline of what we want to accomplish, and that's okay. And that
definitely do not have an outline. I did write down some notes for this, but one thing too.
We got notes
to talk about. I got talking points in my deck. I got bullet points.
Go.
Is for anyone who is listening out there, like I do pronounce it Belan.
Yeah. Okay. I wasn't sure if it was Belan or Belan. Yeah.
Belan, and the part of the reason why I wanted to name it that is. That's I say in the book it's a family name. All that stuff is true.
I was going to ask you about this. Yeah,
but I am not really a Belan myself, and so I have this sort of complicated history where there is this one of my great grandfathers, who I call him my great grandfather, Leo Stephen Belan, who I think is the most interesting character in our whole family tree.
Lineage. Yeah.
Yeah, and he was born in Berlin, Germany, came over to the U.S. through Ellis Island, got separated from his parents, somehow found them later in Chicago, rode the rails around America, got sick
fell
and
off
fell
the
off
train.
the train in Powersville, Missouri,
Yeah.
and was basically just like, I'll just be adopted by this family.
At age 21.
And at age 21, like, how's that even possible? Who does that?
This was so funny. Last night I was watching The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou. I hadn't watched it in like 15 years. I'm just going to watch this movie. And after Ned Plimpton dies, they make him and his wife are talking about, what could we have adopted him? He's like, well, he's 30, but yeah, I'd have considered it. It's like, oh yeah, that's like in Matt's book. Getting adopted in your 20s.
This is like, 1911.
Yeah.
And the dude just doesn't ever... He stays in this little tiny town, but his family is still in Chicago, and they do eventually find him. And there's telegraph and telephones and stuff later. And he's like, what the hell are you doing down there, man? We thought you disappeared.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, I got a different name now. Yeah, I just can't even imagine, like, how do you tell your parents and be like,
Yeah.
you're in your early 20s and you're just like, oh, I got this new identity now.
Yeah.
And, he's born in Germany, speaking German. He had to learn English
Yeah.
at some point. And so he enlists in World War I in the army. And at some point, he's like arrested for being a spy. They're like, throw you in jail. You're not a citizen. You can't join the U.S. Army when you're a German citizen going to fight Germany.
Yeah.
And he agrees to enlist. And his adopted father basically gets him out of jail. And this is in southern Iowa.
Yeah.
And he gets over to France. It's a long story of like how he actually gets to France. And he's with the 88th Division American Expeditionary Forces. And this is just fascinating to me. Like, I have his diaries. I have all the postcards that he sent back from World War I.
Right. And so some of the diary entries that are in this novel are literally his real entries, I imagine.
Right.
Yeah, cool.
Right. Just transcribed.
The day about the horses drowning.
Oh my God.
So crazy. And like you sort of compare it to like, what if like your computer, your hard drive, your phone, everything that contains like data related to your livelihood just got nuked in one day. Like, that's kind of the same thing as what happened to him, right?
Yeah, and like that story, it was a big family story that had been passed down, is that, the team of horses got strangled in the water, caught up in their own reins, and they couldn't get out, and the people couldn't save them, and they basically dragged each other down and drowned in the lake.
Nuts.
And there's this kind of a sub-theme of horses throughout the book.
Yeah.
I don't know if you picked up on that.
Yeah, and like horse stables. How to name horse stables.
Yeah, so the guy who, he owned the land where SFO is now. It was originally called Mills Field in honor of him.
Ogden Mills.
And Ogden Mills. And he's an interesting character who basically owned that horse, Seabiscuit.
Right.
So he himself was a horse breeder, like a lot of rich people. And, I mentioned in the book, like Belan himself, the CEO guy, loves Kentucky Derby.
Right.
And this is a common thing, like with a lot of rich people, just like rich people hobby. But it didn't used to be, it used to be everyone had to have a horse just the way you had a car, like, but it was also like car plus like farming, there was no combines or tractors then.
Yeah.
You had to have horses. And just like how much technology's changed in one man's lifetime, where, here he is depending on horses, going to fight in World War I. He eventually died in 1955, where like auto industry is pretty well developed by 1950.
Yeah.
So that guy really lived through, probably the largest technological change in history. But I'm always been fascinated with genealogy, and so I wanted to put in like some of my actual interest in genealogy as well.
Yeah, and I love this point where you're like, when you meet Belan, the CEO, you're like, wow, that's so interesting. I had like a great grandfather named Belan. Like, I've never heard anyone else with this name, and the guy just like does not give a shit. It's like, oh, cool, and then he just starts talking about the next thing. Like, your narrator's like curiosity for the world and like human interaction and connectivity, storytelling, like the way that facts are like curiously linked and lead into the next ones. This guy's just like such a prick. Like, he couldn't care less. He only cares about like the numbers, right?
And if you work in the corporate world long enough, you will meet people like this who literally all that they're there to talk about is work.
Right.
And if you even try to engage them, even if they have your same name or, went to the same high school as you, you'd be like, wow, that's crazy. And they'd be like, yep.
Anyways, what's the bottom line? Yeah.
Moving on.
Yeah.
So, I mean, with Belan too. So what I was going to say is he was adopted at age 21 by a guy named Reuben T. Booker. So my name,
that's where
Booker,
your name comes from.
Is not even... he was not born a Booker.
Right, yeah.
But the crazy thing too is I'm not really even blood related to him, in that my father is also adopted, and my father, his father's name was Prindle. So like my name probably should have been Prindle. And to me, this is also like a lesson in like in naming, right? And that in a way it doesn't matter. Like whatever your name is, it's sort of like it's coincidence, it's happenstance.
Right.
However, that it could have easily been something else.
Yeah.
And I could have easily been a Belan or a Prindle
Yeah.
or a Booker or some other name. And you go back far enough in your family tree and like, who are all these people? Are you really related to them? You know, like, it's like, I could, most people can't tell you the birth names of all 8 great grandparents.
Oh, I absolutely could not even close.
Yeah.
No idea.
And 16 people, like, you're only going back a couple generations and you're just like, I don't even know these people's names.
Yeah.
And that's like the bare minimum, the name. Just give me the name.
Yeah, like first name.
So
yeah. I can name my grandparents' names beyond that. Maybe one great grandparent.
So, and it's, you know, this guy is also in the book sort of condemned to the idea that this deck he's doing will be forgotten. Yeah. Everything we do will be forgotten.
Oh, yeah.
No one's going to remember it.
What's the line?
Whatever the title is.
The line right near the end, you have like, your grave will one day go unattended.
Yeah, I got that from Conan O'Brien.
Oh, really?
Conan O'Brien has a great story about
eventually all our graves go unattended.
The graves will be unattended.
Yeah.
That's a totally stolen line from Conan O'Brien, and he has this story about, is it Calvin Coolidge? I forget. It goes to some president's grave, and he's just like, there it is, kind of on a hill. It's not even that remarkable of a grave. Yeah. No one else is around. No one here comes to pay a visit. It's not like there's tons of pictures of this thing online. Yeah. And it's like, he was president of the United States, most powerful person in the world.
Right, yeah.
And eventually, he's just another dude in a grave, and there's no one else coming to his grave either.
Yeah.
And that's pretty profound to me. I think where he, maybe I'm mixing up these anecdotes. He has another anecdote. You know, Conan O'Brien's like king of the anecdotes, right?
Yeah.
He has another anecdote of meeting Albert Brooks.
Okay.
And I'll probably butcher this as well. And he's complaining to Albert Brooks about something with his show, and like he wants to do this movie. He's got all these problems, and Albert Brooks at some point leans into him and is like, you know, none of this matters. Like, who cares? It doesn't matter.
Right.
All of this will be forgotten. Like, no one will remember any of this. It doesn't matter. And I feel that way, you know, especially in the corporate world where you go work really hard on some project or some presentation, and it's like, in the end, it's totally forgotten. Like, it's very rare that anyone makes something that is other people at your job will refer back to. It's always looking forward. It's like how a shark always moves forward, right? It's just what's next.
Yeah.
We look back at the past, like people don't read that. They don't go back and read that stuff.
Right. So like the corporate world is not a historian.
No, and like I said, it has some dangerous consequences with, you know, people who, like I say, are unfamiliar with, you know, 30, 40, 50 years of studies on robotics and artificial intelligence, and, you know, what should you do with a machine that maybe could learn something. And there's just a lot of forward progress without thinking back. And man, I think just the speed of change is going to increase so fast that there's not time to look back until something breaks. You know, we look back and we're like, oh shit, should have really gone back and done the reading. You know, that's a big lesson. If I were you, Dave, that'd be the thing I would try to impress upon my children is like, just do the reading.
There's a section, an entry in the book about, I can't remember the person's name, but they're predicting the singularity happening between like 2035 and
Werner Vinge,
2055 or something like that. Is that sort of close?
2005 and 2030. It's on page 40.
Oh, yeah.
And then a poll of other scientists said that AGI would be developed by 2040 or 2050. They just keep guessing down the road and be like, we're on the right path. Maybe in like, I don't know, 20 years.
Then the next line is the casual promise of a future nightmare. It's like, maybe it'll happen between this decade. That's great. It's a great line. Every line in my journals could now be used as a title for the deck. So in terms of like how you wrote this book, something you wrote over like a year and a half, I think you said at one point. Is that right?
So I'd had these note cards. Right. You know, when I first started out, I was really mimicking Marx's style down to even writing little things on a note card, and then when you get a stack of note cards that's like, I don't know, 2 or 3 inches wide, what do you do with them? And Markson says in his books that he puts them in the top of a shoebox lid, and so I started doing that, and then I filled up a shoebox lid, and he says for his books it's like 2 shoebox lids of full of cards, and then he thinks he has a book. So I filled up one with like a lot of different facts, and Markson died in 2010, and so there's a lot of facts that have happened since he's died, and I wanted to try to capture some of those, like keep his spirit alive in a way by finding things that would have maybe interested him if he was me.
Totally.
But then, that was the easy part. The hard part, I think, was coming up with this framing device of the job and the deck. And, I had, like, the same guy, like, just AI on the brain, because it keeps coming up as, like, this is the next great thing. And people have been saying that forever. It's the next great thing. And I just got really annoyed by a lot of, like, hot takes. Like, I don't want to go read a hot take about AI. But I'm forced to deal with it in some way. So the real irony here, Dave, will be it's possible at some point in the future at my job that I will actually be asked to make a deck about something about AI.
So this book was just like an exercise in preparation for that possible day.
Dread. Exercise in dread, maybe.
Like Markson, there's like specifically in Wittgenstein's Mistress, there's parts where the narrator says something and then like a page later they go, actually no, and they just negate what was just said, and that's kind of a recurring thing that happens in that book. So you're like, you can never trust anything that narrator says. There's a funny part right near the beginning where you're talking about waiting for your Uber in the Embarcadero, and you're like, I have to get to the airport like right now. Jimmy phones you, like, I can't talk, I gotta go right now. And then 2 pages later, you're like, I got Embarcadero morphs into the 101, and soon we were stuck in the usual parking lot traffic. I don't mind. I have an hour or 3 to spare. I like to get to the airport early. I don't like to entertain the idea of being late. That reminded me kind of like of our conversation in O'Hare, where we sat there for like 2 or 3 hours and just talked about books and stuff.
Right. I mean, this podcast would not exist without...
This tracks for Matt. Like, he likes to get to the airport really early, 3 hours before the flight.
I was there a lot early. I mean, that's how this podcast exists, is that you and I got there really early for that flight. We had books, and we had opportunity to sit around and talk about books.
That's right.
And I've always loved that about the airport. Like, I think one reason why I like to get there early is, like, there's nothing to do.
Like, for once is a line
for once
that you say, and I love that. It's like, for me now, to be in an airport alone with no kids and just be able to like wander and sit and read and like
it's like a dream, right?
It's an exercise in pure joy. For a lot of people, it's like tedium, but like this kind of tedium excites me at this stage of my life.
Obviously, I'm the same. I absolutely love that whole thing, and I think it used to be a lot more common back when when people took trains, and you'd have to wait at the train station, and getting around was a lot harder. We're spoiled now. If you can be, I can be in LA in 2.5 hours or something. But even on the plane itself, I pay attention to like how many people bring a print book, and there's still a fair number of people that do. Not everyone, but it would be very rare to see like all 3 people in a row in a seat reading a print book.
Right. Yeah.
It's usually like I'm the oddball that just has a print book. But I love that because I don't have a lot of other reading time sometimes. And when I'm on a plane, I can get a lot of reading done.
Totally. Yeah. It is not so bad. I like your thoughts on SFO. I haven't spent a lot of time in that airport, but you have, or your narrator has. I assume you have.
Personally spent a lot of time in it.
And that there's a bargain bookstore in SFO that has
Holy
like
shit,
small
it's so
print,
great.
Small print.
It's unbelievable.
Wow. What's it called?
It's called Compass Books, and they're actually on Twitter, and it is a fantastic bookstore, and there might even be more than one in the city or even in the airport. But they have a bargain books section, and it is like very well curated. Like,
that's awesome.
I bought some books there that were like $7 or $8, and like they had really obscure small press stuff that I like, translations,
Wild.
anthologies, and I was just like, "Fuck, am I the only one here?" Like, clearly not. Like, there must other people in San Francisco coming here and buying. Like, sure, I'll take Dalkey Archives, best of European American fiction,
Right.
1999. Like, I'll buy that.
Yeah.
And I was like, so shocked by this because you just don't expect to see that kind of like
Obscurity.
I don't know, culture and obscurity in that environment.
In a
Also, where
mass
everything
market
is
environment.
it's so overpriced. Like, you know, if you're buying a book at a bookstore in the airport, you're just going to get screwed.
Yeah.
Like, there's no bargain to be had.
Yeah,
So it's
totally.
it's so remarkable to me. And yes, there really is a restaurant there called Yankee Pier. I really do love it.
Yeah.
Always.
And you got to
go
get the
there.
popcorn shrimp according
It's
to your
so good.
assistant. Yeah.
It's really.
Who you're not sure is an AI or not.
Actually, you know,
Virtual
I
assistant.
really love clam chowder. That's my go-to. But yeah, if you're in SFO, like, I think you would have a special appreciation for it. So I sort of wanted to be the great novel of the Yankee Pier restaurant inside SFO. So as far as
They're
I
gonna
know,
send
there is
you,
no
like,
other
gift cards, like
current novel out there that's just about hanging out at Yankee Pier in SFO airport. So
the next time you go there, they're gonna have a Matt Booker Belan Deck quote like on their entry board or something.
they would be like, "Who is this fucking weird guy?
You got to
again?
try
What
the
did he do?"
popcorn shrimp.
They would be like, "Get the hell out of here." No, but I am going there next month, which will be a weird experience of
Okay.
being in SFO after having, published this book. So
Yeah, no kidding. Amanda's your assistant. Maybe I should send her a CAPTCHA. For people who listen to the show and like the writers that we like, they're going to find a lot to love throughout your book as well. This book is peppered with quotes from writers that we like. There's at least 4 or 5 references or specific mentions of Wallace. Saunders gets mentioned, Pynchon's in there. Kyle Beachy, that was cool to see one of our past guests in your book. Where is that Kyle Beachy quote from?
I think it's from his book.
Is that from The Most Fun Thing?
Most Fun
Cool.
Thing, yeah.
Updike, Nabokov, Markson makes appearances, many other writers.
There's a lot of baseball stuff
A lot
in
of
there.
baseball, a lot of like famous actors, actresses. The thing about Johnny Cash burning down like hectares of forest, I never knew about that.
True story.
I Googled it a bunch. So this book does this cool meta thing where like it's about rabbit holes on the internet, and it's very possible that this book takes far less time to read than people who read it are going to spend doing rabbit holes of research that are based on what's in this book. So yeah, like Johnny Cash burned down like many hectares of forest in Northern California. His truck lit on fire. He was sued like $1 million plus by the state. It's like, I didn't know about this, but I'm reading it. And like, it's possible that I spent more time researching the things that you mentioned in this book than it took to read this book, which is so cool. Like, that's a really amazing feat to just like have this book about rabbit holes, and it pushes people towards that.
Go find
as a
your own
curiosity.
rabbit hole.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah,
So
I've had
I
a
love
couple
that.
of people like tell me that they have gone and looked up stuff.
Yeah.
And I will say like all the trivia in this is true.
Yeah.
Like there's no me like trying to trick you with some fake trivia.
Right.
But like one of our mutual friends, like one friend emailed me right away or texted me and was like, "Is that true that Steve Jobs really did date Jennifer Egan?"
Yeah.
And I was like, "Yep, go
Yeah,
look it up."
I looked that up too.
And-
I was like, yeah, oh wow,
And,
did not know this.
And then another friend texted me to say, "Is it true that Cal Ripken wrote 30 books?" And I was like, "Do you know who Cal Ripken is, Dave? The baseball
Like
player?"
Cal Ripken Jr.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like Cal Ripken Jr. wrote nearly 30 books, has published 30 books.
Really?
It was like, he told me he had to put the book down and go Google that like right away. Like,
What are
this has
they
gotta be
primarily
fake.
about? Are they related to
You know,
baseball? Many of them. Are they
Baseball,
fiction or-
leadership. He's got kids' books. It's just like you would think he could do 2 or 3 of those, but
Right.
it's like
30?
30 books.
Wow, that's nuts.
It's been busy.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been interesting to see what interests different people.
Yeah.
Like I said, some people in the more academic world maybe not get as much out of the corporate deck making stuff that you have to do for work, but
Right.
I hope that there's if you know anything about me, that there's something in it that would resonate.
Yeah. Totally. I mean,
some
I
of
have
the quotes.
zero experience in the corporate world. Like I've only been in education since I was 25 as my career profession. So like, I have no idea about what it's like to work in a corporate office. But I mean, I watch enough TV and movies and read enough books that I have like a sense, and friends that do. So I don't think you're going to lose anybody on that stuff at all. I found it fascinating.
Yeah, it's more about the I don't know, being inside one person's mind who does spend more time with books rather than PowerPoint.
Right. Yeah.
And speaking of PowerPoint, I'll tell you one more story about that, which is at a previous job of mine, I had come up with this idea to create a kind of product, a website where people could go to find, it was like an index to a bunch of documents.
Mm-hmm.
And in order for it to work, like you would click on the index name in the left pane of the screen, and on the right pane, wherever that index entry appeared, it would appear from the actual PDF page.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a cool product that, I came up with. I was proud of how it worked and everything. And I was like, well, now we got to name it. And my first name for it was, I had a long list of names, and I was like, what would I really be proud of? Mm-hmm. And I came up with this name of Forethought. And I was like, well, that's a cool name, Forethought. It's kind of predicting what you're going to think, before you think it. And then I started doing like a trademark search on that word for software, and that was the original name of PowerPoint.
Right. And that's in the book.
It's in the book, right. And so the guy who created PowerPoint and originally called it Forethought. Yeah. And he's also the one who was the expert on the English concertina. Right. Which is the little squeeze box. And, I was telling you that right after that in the book, there's a quote from Tori Amos talking about her song Concertina, which I absolutely love. It's one of my favorite songs. And the first line of the song is in the book in a couple of places, which is Clouds Descending.
Right, yeah.
And it's just a great song. And it's just so random that this guy who was a software developer, like, studied the history of this obscure musical instrument. Like, it kind of fits with what I'm saying of, like, I like the weird parts of, Silicon Valley and the tech world where there's some weird shit going on there. Yeah. And, you will occasionally find a guy who's like, well, my real passion is the history of the English concertina, on which I did a dissertation. I just ended up in this job. Like, what the fuck? Let's talk about that. I don't want to talk about PowerPoint. I want to talk about that.
Yeah, no kidding. That's the real human interest stuff. Yeah, that's cool. I love this part on page 42. You say neural networks had advanced past that point in the late 90s. My counterpoint to him, not really. And I wondered if that was a sly I think you should leave reference, because there's several moments throughout I think you should leave where a character just goes, not really.
Not really, no.
Like Santa Claus says that to his boss in Crashmore.
Maybe I've just absorbed it so much that it's part of my personality now.
But, totally. You just chug a bottle of water and then answer someone's question with, not really.
Not really.
They don't come in other styles.
I'll just be on my phone.
For hours and hours. Right. No problem.
I could just be on my phone. But no, that thing about neural networks, I was actually thinking about the Richard Powers book, Galatea 2.2.
Oh, yeah. I still have to read that, man.
Came out in 1996. And yeah, it's one of my favorite books. And it is about this question of like training a neural network. And it's like the Pygmalion story of like, how does it become human? So like Richard Powers was writing about this shit really intelligently like 27 years ago.
Yeah.
And that thing of like, well, it's come a long ways. It's like, not really. Like a lot of what they were doing back then is like very similar to what's being touted now. It's just like, there's a lot of marketing terms have changed around it. And, the speed of change is sped up in some ways, but chatbot, that stuff has existed for a long time. Right, yeah. And that's basically how, the Turing test works. Like develop is relies on that same like idea of a chatbot. And it's just, that's going back, 80 years.
Yeah, totally.
70 years or something. So that idea of like people think now, oh, this is the most technologically advanced time. We have it better now. It's like, not really.
Not really. Is AI art maybe kind of a newer feature of AI technology that hasn't existed as much previously?
Yeah, I would say that that's a newer
Yeah.
application and idea, and it is really scarily good, and especially in creating like fake human faces.
Yeah.
And what are the moral implications of doing that? Like, that's something that I think should be tightly, constrained and watched,
Yeah.
because there are laws about me impersonating a police officer, but what if I can make AI generate a picture of a police officer and send it up to your Facebook Messenger? Like, that's currently like, it's just unexplored territory, but
Yeah.
it's not. I'm sure if I actually knew what I was talking about, I could find AI generated art going back 50 years. Like,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I'm
they're
certainly
all
like not well versed in this conversation at all, but I'm becoming, part of more water cooler moments around it at work and stuff. Yeah.
right. Again, it's probably just marketed differently now.
Yeah.
But I do see it even with like podcast editing has gotten incredibly smart where AI can, do a lot more, but really what they're calling AI is just like cool applications. Like, would you call Microsoft Word? It's a tool. It's not like an AI thing, even though it can underline misspelled words. Well, that's not AI.
Right.
It's a tool that's telling you that. But
Right. You have a
so
line in the book that's like, despite the rise of technology in 21st century, like it has helped with writing very little other than like the advancement past like the typewriter and like the computer keyboard. And I find that to be a fascinating moment. Like, yeah, the human ability to write something sublime and beautiful and poetic is like not really aided by technology.
Yeah, Powers might actually disagree with that, and that
Yeah,
his writing style, I don't know if you've seen his writing method for a while, was like he would, this is crazy, I don't know where I read this, but he would like lay in bed with a computer on the bed or maybe even a laptop on his stomach, and the screen would be projected onto the ceiling.
Okay.
And he would use like text to speech dictation.
Yeah.
So he would just like not even be typing and just like literally dictating what he wants the next like sentence to say, and it would like appear on the ceiling. And like that kind of shit is crazy. Like, if you're doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But for the most part, it does not make it any. It's easier for some people, especially if they're disabled, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true.
But when it comes down to it, I mean, this is why I love the pencil as technology is brilliant. And it's actually, I don't want to go off on a tangent, but pencil itself is like relatively new technology. Famously, like maybe even helped create different grades of graphite by Thoreau. So John Thoreau, his father was a pencil maker in Massachusetts in like the early 1800s. But you go back, we have writing going back thousands of years, but that was not like with what we consider a pencil now. Like ink was easier to develop, quill pens were easier to develop
than lead and graphite.
Graphite was just, charcoal was around obviously like with the Neanderthals and cavemen and stuff, but the pencil itself is a great technology. We say that sometimes with books, like the book itself is a great piece of technology. But there's also
Carl
like
Sagan has a sort of, I saw a clip of this online that Evan Stevens Hall posted. Carl Sagan just like talking about the wonderful technology of books.
It is. It is, and that's why it's not obsolete. But there's also like kind of a tweet that's going around, or a sentiment that's going around of like, is this really the future that we want, where AI is given the jobs of making art, writing poetry, and creating songs, when it's like, shouldn't that be the domain of humans? Like, is it going to end up where we have somehow engineered it where it's like, oh, it's a lot easier for the computer to just go create art, and it's like, well, what's left for us to do?
Yeah, that's a scary tipping point, I think.
And one of my inspirations in writing this book was a J.G. Ballard book called SuperCon. And SuperCon is kind of set in the near future where it's in a private, like gated community, wealthy community in the south of France. And there's some like meditation in there on the idea of work and non-work and anti-work versus leisure. And at one point, he's questioning, like, is luxury itself ethical? Is, how can you have any morals and also live a really like luxurious life? but also contemplating like what would be the future of humanity if if there was no work to be done. Like if we had gotten rid of like everyone who has a white collar job now, it's like we got robots to do it. So what do you do?
Yeah.
And like your needs are taken care of. And like in his book or in his character's speculation, it's like there's a lot of sex, there's a lot of
Drug
sports,
use.
and that's it. And it's so great because it's just like auto racing and tennis and golf and like but the idea really being like you're free to pursue what really interests you if you're freed from work.
Right.
And like for a lot of people that would be art and music and pottery and writing and researching and inventing new things if it were not for the constraints of having to go make a PowerPoint.
Yeah. That's it reminds me of like Ray Bradbury's The Veldt, that short story. Do you know this one? Where there's
what is it called?
The Veldt. And it's about a futuristic home that this family has where like the house itself does the cooking, the cleaning, washing, all of the like Jetson robot style stuff. And then they have this kind of this room for the kids. It's like the rumpus room, but it's got like televisual walls basically. And so it can simulate like the African Sahara or whatever.
Yes.
And that's what it does. And then there's like this lion and there's like smells and there's all kinds of like sensory stuff that this room can do. And then in the end, like the father gets eaten by the lion from the walls, you know. But like there is like the characters in that story are like depressed because they have no meaningful work to do, you know. Even like I don't know how like meaningful like cooking and cleaning are on like a human existential scale, but like there's maybe something to be said for like making something yourself and enjoying it. And I don't know.
Well, I think even in Marx, and he has this line, it's from like fucking Einstein or something, that's like this cooking and cleaning shit is endless. It's like, it's like from one of his letters or something.
Yeah.
Maybe it's Einstein or someone really brilliant, right? It's just like
or something about like his hobbies are just cooking and cleaning. What was that?
That's in your Harbin Killebrew. That was in my book where his hobbies is just like doing the dishes.
I don't know, like doing the dishes. That's a great line.
But you know, let me make it clear: if we can invent more robots that can do all of the cooking and cleaning and dishes, I'm all for that.
I would sign up for that.
Sure. More scientists need to figure out, like, go work on laundry.
Yeah.
Like, it's like Seinfeld has this bit about, like, the scientist who came up with the seedless watermelon. He's like, really? That's where you put all of your scientific energy is to coming up with the seedless watermelon? It's like you could have gone and worked on like cancer or diabetes. It's like,
right.
No, the seedless watermelon.
Yeah, because it's just such a massive human problem.
Like there has been almost no technology advances in laundry in my lifetime. Like what the hell?
Yeah. Or
like
dishwashing.
Hand washing.
Yeah.
I still have so much hand washing to do, even though we have a dishwasher.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and we cook a lot. I like cooking, and I'm like, the cooking and the cleaning, all of that stuff. Yeah. Please apply your scientific genius. Put some robots and AI.
The future the Jetsons promised us. Future.
Well, and what I say in the book too. What I love about the Jetsons robots is that like, there's no confusing them for a human.
That's right. Yeah.
All they can do is cook and clean, and they clearly look like
androids.
robots.
Yeah.
Now they look like robots, and they only do robot stuff, which is cooking and cleaning. Right. And like we had the thing that goes on the floor, the iRobot vacuum thing, you know, and it was the dumbest robot in the world and really not a great vacuum, and I absolutely hated that thing, and it broke
Roomba,
down so
is that
much.
what it's called?
Roomba, yeah. And it broke down all the time, and it was so unreliable, and I got rid of it, and I was like, it's the right idea, you know, like if they could do that with mowing the yard and stuff, but
yes,
it's just so bad right now. Like maybe our grandchildren will live to see some like house cleaning robots.
We can only hope, if the climate crisis doesn't consume their world before that happens. Well, Matt, it has been wonderful to like sit down with you and talk about something that you made. It's a very, very cool one-off episode for us. Where is the best place that people can find this book to buy it and to read it?
I really don't care. You can buy it on
There's
Amazon.
A lot of hits, yeah.
You can buy it on Barnes & Noble. You can buy it on bookshop.org. You can order it from your local bookstore. I seriously doubt any of them are stocking it, but they can order it.
Can you buy it directly from Sideshow Media Group?
I'd
Website?
prefer if you didn't. It's
Okay.
just a pain in the butt. I think
For you specifically, because you have to mail
no,
it?
no,
Or your
no,
brother
no.
does?
I don't do the fulfillment on that.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
not me.
Yeah.
But I would prefer. I think if just people did what's easiest for them, and a couple people have asked me like, "Oh, I want to make sure you get paid as an artist," and I believe in supporting. And it's a nice idea, but like I'm literally, this is a few bucks, and I'm like literally not making money off of this, so it's not.
Right.
You can support me just by reading it, and
Yeah.
if you buy it from Amazon, I promise I won't tell anyone. If you buy it from bookshop.org, I don't care where you buy it, but it's nice if people do want to buy it. I am going to be reading from it at the David Foster Wallace conference. We're having
This next
a
week
reading.
here. All right.
Yeah, this next week. So that'll be the first like kind of reading that I've ever done from it. And again,
Very
I
cool.
never thought I would be doing that. Whenever I wrote the book, I was like, it's not really meant to be like read from. You notice I didn't read an excerpt on this podcast.
Do you want to?
No, it's not really like an excerptable type.
Okay.
It's just a lot of like random stuff.
Yeah.
If people want to read it, they will. But thanks for promoting it. I really appreciate you being supportive of it, Dave. Because again, I had no
really love
idea
it.
if it would resonate, because it is so much me,
Mm-hmm.
and the danger of that is if someone rejects it, it's like you're rejecting me.
Yeah, that's true. But someone who doesn't know you won't necessarily know that it's you in the way that like a good friend of yours would,
And plenty of people who don't know me have read the book and liked it. So I am encouraged by that.
Yeah.
But the lesson that I would give to anyone else is like, write for yourself. Do what the book that you want to see into the world, that you would want to buy, that you would want to read more about. Do that. And we can't all be David Markson. We can't all be David Foster Wallace. So you have to be yourself. And that's been a very long journey for me to get to that point in terms of writing something that's even vaguely like fictional.
Right. Yeah. There's a line in this book where you say, someone right now is writing the perfect book for you. Something to that effect. I'm trying to find it right now. I highlighted it. Do you know the line exactly?
No.
Anyways, as I was reading that, and in hindsight, having read it twice, I feel like this book that you wrote, Matt, is like that perfect book for me. Like it just nailed a lot of stuff.
All right,
that I love.
it says
And
there's a book out there being written today that is just for you.
I just found it as you started reading it on page 36. Yeah, and I thought, this feels like a book that's just for me. And I have a feeling that a lot of our listeners will feel the same way about the Belan Deck. So thanks for your
really
time,
flattering.
Matt,
Thank you.
in writing this and for putting it out into the world and talking about it today. You also did a great interview with, I was trying to find it. I was trying to Google it today. I saw it on Instagram like a week ago, maybe.
J. Ennis Murray.
J. Ennis Murray. Okay. We'll link to that in the show notes. I'll link to some other reviews of the book as well and places where people can buy it. So feel free to check the show notes and click some of those links if you want to check out more on the Belan Deck. We want to thank a new patron this month. We've got a new supporter. We want to thank Tim Abondello so much for your financial support of the show. It means so much to us. Thank you, Tim. Any other final thoughts, Matt, or announcements?
Two things I would say. If you do want to read an excerpt from the book, it's on my website, mattbucher.com. And we've been a little slow in putting out episodes this year, Dave, but we do have a bunch in that we're planning to do. So stick with us, and we're gonna do a bunch more episodes at some point. So stick with us. We're working on it.
Yeah, life has been kind of curiously crazy this year for us, and I've trying to come to grips with learning to be okay with not putting too much pressure on myself about the release schedule of this show, because it does take a lot of planning and forethought and scheduling and all that kind of stuff. And it's this isn't our job. We're not getting paid money by an employer to do this. So it's I would love to be releasing something once every month or two. This year has been a bit slower. So thank you everyone for your patience. We appreciate it. But yeah, more to come. And stick around for a short bonus episode in which Matt and I talk about our year in reading so far.
Catch me now as I sing into darkness I thought to be extinct.
And the next line is the causal promise of a future nightmare. I love
Casual
that.
promise. Casual promise.
Sorry.